The crimson sunset painted the dusty trail as Kieran O'Malley adjusted his grip on the small, feverish bundle in his arms. His 6-year-old daughter Lily's forehead burned against his rough palm, her usually rosy cheeks now ashen beneath a layer of trail dust. 20 miles of hard riding had taken them across the unforgiving Arizona territory, and the weathered cowboy's heart hammered with fear as he spurred his exhausted horse toward the small cabin perched on the hill ahead. Kieran had been alone with Lily for 2 years now, since his wife Sarah had succumbed to pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. He'd managed as best a widowed father could, taking his daughter along on cattle drives when necessary and leaving her with friendly families when the work became too dangerous. But nothing had prepared him for the terror of watching his child burning with fever, miles from proper medical help. "Almost there, sweet pea," he whispered, though Lily's eyes remained closed, her small body limp against his chest. "Just hold on." The cabin belonged to Penelope Morgan, the territory's newest resident. Folks in town called her the Lady Doctor, though most did so with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Women physicians were rare enough back east in these parts. They were practically unheard of. But rumor had it she'd trained properly in Philadelphia before coming west 6 months ago. And right now, Kieran didn't care about propriety or convention. He only cared about saving his daughter. As his horse crested the final rise, Kieran could see lamplight glowing in the cabin's windows. The modest structure sat nestled against a copse of cottonwoods, a small corral and outbuilding visible in the fading light. He guided his horse to the front of the cabin and dismounted awkwardly, careful not to jostle Lily as he cradled her against him. "Hello?" he called, his voice cracking with exhaustion and worry as he approached the door. "Is anybody home? Please, my daughter's sick." For a terrifying moment, silence answered him. Then came the sound of footsteps, and the door swung open. The woman who stood in the doorway was not what Kieran had expected. Somewhere in her late 20s, she wore a simple blue dress with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical knot at the nape of her neck, though several strands had escaped to frame a face more handsome than beautiful, with intelligent eyes that quickly assessed the situation before her. "Come in," she said, stepping aside without hesitation. Relief flooded through Kieran as he ducked through the doorway. The interior was warm and smelled of herbs and fresh bread. One half of the cabin was clearly set up as a medical office, with an examination table, shelves of medicines, and instruments organized neatly on a desk. "Put her here," Penelope directed, quickly clearing the table and laying down a clean sheet. "How long has she been ill?" Kieran gently placed Lily on the table, reluctant to let go of her even now. "Started with a cough 2 days back. By this morning, she was burning up. I've been on the trail since dawn trying to reach town, but when I heard there was a doctor living out this way." Penelope's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she examined Lily, checking her pulse, feeling her forehead, and listening to her breathing. "What's her name?" she asked, her voice softening as she looked at the child. "Lily. She's 6. My only one." Penelope nodded, her expression grave but composed. "And yours?" "Kieran O'Malley. I've got a small spread about 20 miles east of here. Mr. O'Malley, Lily has a serious chest infection. I need to bring her fever down and help ease her breathing." She looked up at him, her eyes direct. "I can help her, but I'll need your assistance." For the next several hours, Kieran followed Penelope's instructions exactly. He helped her prepare a mustard plaster for Lily's chest, fetched water from the well outside, and held his daughter upright so she could drink the medicinal tea Penelope brewed from herbs in her garden. Throughout it all, Penelope worked with a steady confidence that gradually calmed his frantic worry. "You're good with her?" Penelope remarked as they took a moment's rest while Lily slept. She handed Kieran a cup of coffee, which he accepted gratefully. "Had to be," he replied, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to him. Her mother died when she was 4. Been just the two of us since then. Penelope's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Kieran sipped the coffee, studying her over the rim of his cup. Most folks around here aren't used to a woman doctor. A small, wry smile curved her lips. I'm well aware. That's why I set up practice outside of town. Figured it might be easier for people to accept me if I didn't try to compete directly with Dr. Harrison. Smart thinking, Kieran nodded. Though from what I've seen, you know your business better than most. Medical school tends to have that effect, she said with a trace of dry humor. Though I'll admit, practicing medicine out here presents challenges they never covered in Philadelphia. Before Kieran could respond, Lily stirred and began to cough. Both adults moved immediately to her side. The next few hours were tense as Lily's fever spiked higher, and Penelope applied cool compresses while administering a dose of willow bark extract to help reduce the fever. Near midnight, when the little girl's breathing finally eased and her temperature began to drop, Kieran felt something inside him give way. He stepped outside onto the small porch, overwhelmed by relief and the residual terror of how close he'd come to losing his daughter. He didn't hear Penelope follow him out until she spoke. She's going to be all right, Mr. O'Malley. Kieran turned, not bothering to hide the moisture in his eyes. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if. But you didn't have to find out, she said gently. You got her here in time. That counts for a lot. The moonlight silvered her features, softening them in a way the practical daylight hadn't. For the first time, Kieran noticed the shadows beneath her eyes and the fatigue in her posture. You should rest, he said. I can watch over Lily. Penelope shook her head. I'll check on her through the night. But you need sleep more than I do. There's a cot in the back room you can use. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, it's medical advice, she interrupted with a firm tone that brooked no argument. Your daughter will need you at full strength tomorrow. Reluctantly, Kieran agreed, though he insisted on checking on Lily one more time before retiring to the small room Penelope had indicated. Despite his exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Every small sound had him alert, listening for signs that Lily might need him. Sometime before dawn, he gave up and returned to the main room. He found Penelope asleep in a chair pulled up beside the examination table where Lily rested. One of her hands rested lightly on the child's wrist, as if she'd fallen asleep while checking her pulse. The scene struck something deep in Kieran's heart, the care the stranger had shown his daughter, the gentle vigilance that reminded him painfully of what Lily had lost when her mother died. As if sensing his presence, Penelope stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment, still caught between sleep and waking, her expression was unguarded, vulnerable in a way Kieran suspected she rarely allowed herself to be. Her fever's gone, Penelope said softly, quickly recovering her professional demeanor as she stood and checked Lily properly. The medicine and rest are working. Thanks to you, Kieran said. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Penelope brushed aside his gratitude. It's why I became a doctor, Mr. O'Malley. No repayment necessary. But as the first light of dawn filtered through the cabin windows, illuminating Lily's sleeping face, now peaceful and cooler to the touch, Kieran made a silent promise to himself that he would find a way to express his gratitude properly. 3 days passed before Penelope deemed Lily well enough to travel. During that time, Kieran split his hours between helping care for his daughter and tending to Penelope's small homestead. He repaired her leaky roof, chopped enough firewood to last her well into winter, and fixed the broken hinge on her corral gate. Each evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, he and Penelope would sit at her small kitchen table, talking long into the night. He learned that she was 28 years old, the daughter of a Philadelphia surgeon who had encouraged her interest in medicine despite society's disapproval. She'd graduated near the top of her class at the Woman's Medical College of Pennsylvania, only to find most hospitals unwilling to hire a female physician. "Why come all the way out here?" Kieran asked on their final evening. "Surely there must have been opportunities closer to home." Penelope's fingers traced the rim of her teacup. "My father died last year. After that, there was nothing keeping me in Philadelphia. And out here," she smiled faintly, "out here, people judge you more on what you can do than who you are. At least that's what I hoped. Has it been what you expected?" "Harder in some ways, easier in others." Her eyes met his. "The isolation can be difficult, but the freedom to practice medicine on my own terms makes up for it." Kieran nodded, understanding all too well the trade-offs of frontier life. "Lily and I, we're grateful you chose this place." The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for traveling. Kieran saddled his horse while Penelope packed a small bundle of medicines and instructions for Lily's continued care. "Give her this tea twice daily for another week," she explained, handing him a packet of dried herbs. "And make sure she gets plenty of rest. No strenuous activities until that cough is completely gone." "Yes, madam," Kieran said, smiling as he secured the medicines in his saddlebag. Lily, though still pale, was alert and cheerful. She'd taken an immediate liking to Penelope, following the doctor around the cabin and asking endless questions about her medicines and instruments. Now she stood beside the horse, clutching the small rag doll Penelope had fashioned for her from scraps of fabric. "Can we come visit Dr. Penny again, Papa?" she asked, using the nickname she'd bestowed on Penelope. Kieran glanced at Penelope, raising an eyebrow in question. "You're both welcome any time," she said, her professional composure softening as she knelt to Lily's level. "But only if you promise to stay healthy, young lady." Lily nodded solemnly. "I promise." After helping Lily into the saddle, Kieran turned to Penelope. For a moment words failed him. How did one thank someone for saving what mattered most in the world? "Dr. Morgan Penelope, he began. She shook her head, understanding in her eyes. "Safe travels, Mr. O'Malley." As they rode away, Kieran looked back to see her standing in front of her cabin, one hand raised in farewell. Something tugged at his heart, a feeling he'd thought long buried with Sarah. He turned forward again, focusing on the trail ahead and the precious bundle secured before him in the saddle. 2 weeks passed before Kieran could make good on his promise to visit. Ranch work had piled up during his absence, and a dispute with a neighboring cattle operation over water rights had consumed much of his time. But finally, with Lily fully recovered and the most pressing tasks completed, he loaded his daughter into the wagon and set out for Penelope's cabin. They arrived to find her garden in full bloom, medicinal herbs and vegetables growing in neat rows behind the cabin. Penelope emerged at the sound of their wagon, wiping her hands on her apron, her face lighting with surprise and what looked like pleasure. "Lily, Mr. O'Malley, what a nice surprise," she called, coming to meet them. Lily scrambled down from the wagon before Kieran could help her, rushing to show Penelope the picture book she'd brought. Kieran followed more slowly, suddenly uncertain of his welcome despite Penelope's warm greeting. "I hope we're not intruding," he said as he approached. "Not at all. I was just harvesting some herbs for drying." She looked down at Lily, who was tugging at her skirt to get her attention. "My, don't you look healthy? Your father must be taking excellent care of you." "Papa says I'm as strong as a young colt now," Lily announced proudly. "And I've been drinking all my tea, just like you said." "That's wonderful to hear." Penelope smiled at the child before looking up at Kieran. "Would you both like to stay for lunch? It's nothing fancy, just rabbit stew, but there's plenty." The visit stretched pleasantly into the afternoon. After lunch, Penelope showed Lily how to identify different medicinal plants in her garden, while Kieran helped clean up. When Penelope discovered that Lily had never learned to read, she offered to teach her during their visits. "If you plan to come back, that is," she added, a question in her voice. "I think we'd like that," Kieran replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "If you're sure we wouldn't be a bother." "No bother at all," she assured him. "It gets quiet out here sometimes." And so a pattern was established. Every week or two, Kieran would bring Lily to Penelope's cabin. While the doctor gave the little girl reading lessons, Kieran would help with whatever needed doing around the homestead. Sometimes they'd stay for a meal. Other times, they'd bring provisions from town that were difficult for Penelope to obtain on her own. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and shorter days, these visits became the highlight of Kieran's week. He found himself looking forward not just to seeing the way Lily blossomed under Penelope's attentions, but to the conversations he and Penelope shared after Lily had fallen asleep or become absorbed in practicing her letters. There was an ease between them that Kieran hadn't experienced with anyone since Sarah. Penelope was educated in ways he wasn't, but she never made him feel inferior for his practical knowledge rather than book learning. And she really listened when he spoke about ranching or his hopes for Lily's future. It was during one such conversation, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the desert in golds and purples, that Kieran realized his feelings for Penelope had deepened beyond friendship or gratitude. "Winter will be here before we know it," Penelope remarked, pulling her shawl closer around her shoulders against the evening chill. "My first winter out here. I've been told I should expect snow." "Not much, usually," Kieran said, "but enough to make travel difficult sometimes. The passes can get blocked for days." Penelope nodded thoughtfully. "I've been stocking up on supplies, but I worry about patients being able to reach me if the weather turns bad." "You could." Kieran hesitated, then pushed ahead. "You could move into town for the winter. There's a small house next to the mercantile that's been vacant since old Mr. Fletcher passed. Might make it easier for folks to find you when they need help." "That's kind of you to suggest," she said with a small smile. "But I doubt Dr. Harrison would appreciate the competition setting up right in town. Harrison's getting on in years. His hands aren't as steady as they used to be. Truth is, the town could use you." Penelope was quiet for a long moment. "I'll consider it," she finally said, "though I've grown rather attached to this place." Kieran looked out at the vista before them, the rolling landscape, the distant mountains, the vast sky. "It's a special spot," he agreed, "but it would just be for the winter. And Lily and I would help with the move." "And how is Lily's reading coming along?" Penelope asked, clearly changing the subject. "She practices every night before bed. Says she wants to make you proud." A soft expression crossed Penelope's face. "She's a remarkable child. You've done well with her, Kieran." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it in her voice sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the last rays of sunlight. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted. "There's so much a girl needs to learn that I don't know how to teach. Sarah would have." He trailed off, surprised to find that speaking of his late wife didn't bring the sharp pain it once had. "You miss her," Penelope said. Not a question, but a gentle acknowledgement. "Every day," Kieran nodded. "But it's different now. Lily helps me remember the good times instead of just the loss." Penelope reached over and briefly touched his hand, a gesture of comfort that lingered in his awareness long after they'd said their goodbyes, and he'd headed home with the sleeping Lily nestled against him in the wagon. As October gave way to November, a tension began to build between them, unacknowledged but undeniably present. Kieran found excuses to visit more frequently, offering to help Penelope prepare her cabin for winter. She never turned him away, but there was a carefulness to her manner now, as if she were holding something back. The situation came to a head one evening when an early snowstorm caught them by surprise. Kieran and Lily had planned to leave before dark, but the sudden squall made travel too dangerous. "You'll have to stay the night," Penelope said, peering out the window at the swirling white. "The trail will be treacherous in this weather, especially after dark." Kieran hesitated, acutely aware of how such an arrangement might appear to others. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to compromise your reputation." Penelope turned to him with a flash of the spirit that had first drawn him to her. "My reputation? Mr. O'Malley, I'm a female physician in a territory where most people still believe women belong only in the kitchen or nursery. I think my reputation can withstand offering shelter to a father and child during a storm." He had to smile at that. "When you put it that way." They made Lily a comfortable bed near the fireplace, and she fell asleep quickly, tired from the day's activities and lulled by the warmth of the fire. Kieran and Penelope sat at the table, speaking in low voices to avoid waking her. "I've been thinking about your suggestion," Penelope said, surprising him. "About moving to town for the winter." "Oh?" Kieran tried to keep his voice neutral, though his pulse quickened. "I've decided against it." His disappointment must have shown on his face, because she quickly continued. "But I've also been thinking that I need to be more accessible to patients. So I've written to my cousin in St. Louis. She's a widow with experience in nursing, and I've asked if she would consider coming out here to help me establish a proper clinic in town while I maintain my practice here." "That sounds like a good compromise," Kieran said. "Though I admit I was hoping you might be closer to town. Closer to us." The words hung in the air between them. Penelope's eyes widened slightly, and she looked down at her hands, folded on the table. "Kieran," she began, then stopped, as if unsure how to continue. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I shouldn't have—" "No," she interrupted. "Please don't apologize. It's just—" She took a deep breath. "I've worked so hard to establish myself as a physician. My whole life has been focused on that goal. And now that I'm finally practicing medicine on my own terms, I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked gently. "Afraid of losing what I've built. Afraid that if I allow myself to care for you and Lily too much, I'll have to choose between my profession and—" She gestured vaguely. "And a family?" Kieran supplied. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Penelope, look at me." He waited until she raised her gaze to his. "I would never ask you to give up your calling. What you do, the people you help, it's who you are. I understand that better than most." "Do you?" she asked, vulnerability plain in her voice. "My wife, Sarah. She was a schoolteacher before we married. She gave it up when we moved west, and though she never said it directly, I know she missed it. I don't want that regret for you, or for anyone He stopped himself, suddenly uncertain. "Anyone you what?" Penelope prompted softly. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the cabin. In the glow, Penelope's face was both familiar and mysterious, the face of a woman who had saved his child, who had become his friend, and who had, without his quite realizing it, captured his heart. "Anyone I love," he finished simply. The words seemed to hang in the air, honest and unadorned. Penelope's expression softened, but before she could respond, a small voice interrupted. "Papa," Lily called sleepily from her makeshift bed. "I'm thirsty." The moment broken, they both moved to attend to the child. By the time Lily had been given water and tucked back in, the intimate atmosphere had dissipated, replaced by a careful politeness that lasted until they all retired for the night, Lily and Penelope in the bedroom, Kieran on a pallet near the fire. The storm passed by morning, leaving a thin blanket of snow that glittered in the sunrise. Kieran and Lily prepared to leave after breakfast, the conversation from the previous night unmentioned but not forgotten. As they were saying their goodbyes at the wagon, Penelope suddenly said, "I would like to come to dinner at your ranch sometime, if the invitation is still open." Kieran had extended the invitation weeks ago, but had given up hope when Penelope repeatedly found reasons to decline. "Of course," he said, trying not to sound too eager. "Any time you'd like." "How about this Sunday?" she suggested, a new determination in her voice. "I find I'd like to see where you and Lily live." "Sunday would be perfect," Kieran agreed, his heart lighter than it had been in months. As they drove away, Lily waved enthusiastically until the cabin disappeared from view. "I like Dr. Penny," she announced. "She smells like flowers and knows stories about princesses who save themselves." Kieran chuckled. "Does she now?" "Uh-huh. And she looks at you the way Mrs. Johnson looks at Mr. Johnson in town." "And how's that, sweet pea?" Lily considered for a moment. "Like you're her favorite person, but also like you might do something silly she'll have to fix." Out of the mouths of babes, Kieran thought with amusement. "Well, your old pa can be pretty silly sometimes." "That's okay." Lily patted his arm reassuringly. "Dr. Penny's really smart. She can help you." Sunday couldn't arrive quickly enough for Kieran. He spent the days leading up to it giving the ranch house a thorough cleaning it hadn't seen since Sarah was alive. He repaired loose floorboards, hung new curtains purchased from the general store, and even splurged on real coffee and sugar for the occasion. Lily got into the spirit as well, picking wildflowers to put in jars around the house and insisting on wearing her best dress, the one Penelope had helped her sew during their lessons. When Penelope arrived, riding her own horse with confidence, Kieran felt a surge of pride at the sight of her. She traded her usual practical work clothes for a simple but becoming dress of deep blue, with her hair arranged more carefully than usual beneath a modest hat. "Welcome to our home," he said, helping her dismount. "It's not much compared to what you might be used to back east, but it's wonderful," she interrupted, looking around at the modest ranch house, the well-kept barn, and the corrals where several horses grazed. "You've built something special here, Kieran." Lily came running from the house, throwing her arms around Penelope's waist. "Dr. Penny, come see my room. I put up the alphabet you taught me." Dinner was a relaxed affair, with Lily dominating the conversation, eager to show Penelope every aspect of her life at the ranch. After the meal, when Lily reluctantly went to bed, Kieran and Penelope sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. "She's flourishing," Penelope remarked. "You should be proud." "I am," Kieran agreed, "though I can't take all the credit. You've been good for her, Penelope. Better than I think you know." She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "I've never considered myself particularly maternal. My focus has always been on my medical practice." "Being good with children isn't just about being maternal," Kieran said. "It's about respect. You treat Lily like a person, not just a child. You listen to her. That matters." Penelope was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not wanting me to give up my calling." She took a deep breath. "The truth is, I came west partly because I thought it would be easier to practice medicine without the social pressures of Philadelphia, but also because I'd given up on certain things, a family, children of my own. I thought I had to choose." "And now?" Kieran asked, hardly daring to hope. She turned to face him fully. "Now I'm not so sure. These past months, spending time with you and Lily, it's made me question that assumption. Maybe it is possible to have both, at least out here where the rules are different." Kieran reached out slowly and took her hand. When she didn't pull away, he entwined his fingers with hers. "I think we make our own rules, Penelope. Together." Her smile was like sunrise after a long night. "I think I'd like that." The weeks that followed were a time of cautious discovery. Penelope began spending more time at the ranch, and Kieran made improvements to her cabin, adding a covered walkway between the main structure and the outbuilding, which they converted into a proper examination room for her patients. As winter deepened, the residents of the nearby town and surrounding homesteads came to accept the relationship between the rancher and the lady doctor. There were raised eyebrows and whispered comments, of course, but these were overshadowed by the practical benefits of having a skilled physician who didn't mind making house calls during snowstorms and a rancher who was noticeably happier and more involved in community affairs. Christmas approached, bringing with it Lily's excitement and Kieran's memories of holidays past. One evening, as they decorated the small pine tree Kieran had cut and brought into the ranch house, Penelope noticed his melancholy. "You're thinking of Sarah," she said quietly when Lily had gone to fetch more of the paper ornaments they'd made. Kieran nodded, not surprised that she'd read his thoughts. Christmas was her favorite. She'd start planning months in advance, saving egg money to buy special treats for Lily. He smiled at the memory. "The first Christmas after she died, I could barely get out of bed, if it hadn't been for Lily." Penelope touched his arm gently. "It's all right to remember her, Kieran, to miss her, especially at times like this." "I know," he said, covering her hand with his own. "And I'm grateful that you understand that. Some women might not." "I'm not some women," Penelope reminded him with a small smile. "No," he agreed, his gaze warm. "You certainly are not." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. Penelope arrived early, bearing gifts: a new doll for Lily, handcrafted by a patient in exchange for medical services, and for Kieran, a finely tooled leather medicine pouch containing remedies for common ailments. "So you'll have what you need if Lily gets sick when I'm not around," she explained as he examined it. "It's perfect," he said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Though I hope you'll be around more often than not." He presented her with a gift of his own, a beautifully crafted wooden box with compartments for her various medicines and instruments, designed to fit securely in a saddlebag. "For your house calls," he explained. "I noticed your current bag was getting worn." Lily's gift to Penelope was a carefully drawn picture of the three of them, standing in front of what appeared to be a combination of the ranch house and Penelope's cabin. "That's our family," she explained proudly. "You, me, and Papa." Penelope's eyes glistened as she knelt to hug the child. Over Lily's shoulder, she met Kieran's gaze, and in that moment, a decision seemed to pass between them. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep amid her new treasures, Kieran and Penelope stood close together near the dying fire. "She called us a family," Penelope said softly. "Is that what you want?" Kieran asked, his heart in his throat. "To be a family?" Penelope looked up at him, all her usual composure replaced by vulnerable honesty. "Yes, more than I ever thought possible." Kieran took her hands in his. "Penelope Morgan, I love you. I think I've loved you since the night you opened your door and told me to come in with my sick child in my arms. You saved more than Lily that night. You saved me, too, though I didn't know it then." Tears spilled onto Penelope's cheeks. "I love you too, Kieran. You and Lily both." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with a growing passion that spoke of all the nights they dreamed of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Be my wife, Lily's mother, and still be the doctor you were meant to be. We'll make it work together." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They were married in the spring, when the desert bloomed with unexpected color. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in the town church with Lily serving proudly as flower girl. Dr. Harrison, won over by Penelope's skill and dedication during a difficult winter, stood as a witness alongside the town mayor. After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch, now expanded with an addition that served as Penelope's office and examination room. It was a compromise they had worked out together. She would maintain her medical practice at the ranch, making it easier for patients to find her while still allowing her to be part of the family life she'd come to cherish. That evening, as Lily slept and the newlyweds sat on their porch watching the sunset, Kieran marveled at how life could change in less than a year. "What are you thinking?" Penelope asked, leaning against his shoulder. "I'm thinking about the night I brought Lily to your cabin," he answered honestly. "How terrified I was, how alone I felt." She took his hand, her wedding ring catching the last rays of sunlight. "And now," Kieran smiled, drawing her closer. "Now I know that night wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. For all of us." 5 years later, the O'Malley Ranch had prospered and grown. What had once been a modest operation was now one of the most successful in the territory, thanks to Kieran's hard work and Penelope's careful management of their finances. The medical practice had expanded as well, with Penelope's cousin Eliza having joined them 2 years earlier to help manage the growing number of patients who came from miles around seeking the lady doctor's care. Lily, now 11, had blossomed into a confident young girl who excelled at both her studies and ranch activities. She helped Penelope with simple medical tasks and had declared her intention to become a doctor herself someday, a dream her stepmother wholeheartedly encouraged. The family had grown too, with the addition of 3-year-old twins, Samuel and Charlotte, who had their father's dark hair and their mother's determined spirit. Penelope had worried that motherhood might force her to cut back her medical work, but with Eliza's help and Kieran's unwavering support, she had found a balance that allowed her to fulfill both roles. On a warm autumn afternoon, as Penelope finished treating a local rancher's broken arm, Kieran appeared at the door of her office, his expression unusually serious. "Everything all right?" she asked once her patient had departed. "Just received word from town," he said, coming to sit beside her desk. "There's been an accident at the Carson mine. Several men trapped. They're asking for you." Penelope immediately began gathering supplies. "How long ago?" "About 2 hours. Tom Miller rode out as soon as it happened. I've already saddled your horse and packed some extra bandages." She paused in her preparations to smile at him gratefully. "What would I do without you?" "Let's hope you never have to find out," he replied, helping her with her medical bag. "I'll come with you." "No," she said firmly. "The children need you here. Eliza can assist me." Though concern shadowed his features, Kieran nodded. After 5 years of marriage, he had learned to trust her judgment in these matters. "Promise me you'll be careful. Always." She kissed him quickly, then hurried to finish her preparations. Within 15 minutes, Penelope and Eliza were riding toward the mining camp, pushing their horses as fast as was safe over the rough terrain. When they arrived, they found a scene of controlled chaos, miners working desperately to clear a collapsed tunnel entrance, while others provided support and direction. The mine foreman, a gruff man named Jenkins, approached as they dismounted. "Dr. O'Malley, thank you for coming so quickly. We've got 4 men still trapped inside. 2 others managed to get out, but they're in bad shape." Penelope immediately took charge, directing Eliza to tend to the injured miners while she consulted with Jenkins on the rescue effort. For the next several hours, she moved between treating the wounded and advising the rescue team, her calm presence bringing order to the frantic scene. As night fell, lanterns were lit around the mine entrance. The rescue work continued by their flickering light, with Penelope refusing to rest despite Eliza's concerned glances. Finally, near midnight, a shout went up from the workers they'd broken through to the trapped men. One by one, the miners were brought out, all alive but in varying states of injury. Penelope worked tirelessly, setting broken bones, cleaning wounds, and treating the effects of dust inhalation. It was nearly dawn when the last miner was stabilized enough for transport to town. "You've saved lives today, Doctor," Jenkins said gruffly as Penelope packed her supplies. "Those men wouldn't have made it without you." "Just doing my job," she replied, though the exhaustion in her voice belied the casual response. "Your husband must be a patient man," the foreman remarked. Not many would be comfortable with their wives riding out to mining accidents in the middle of the night. Penelope smiled, thinking of Kieran waiting at home. "He understands what this work means to me." The sun was rising as Penelope and Eliza finally headed back to the ranch. They rode slowly, both women too exhausted for speed. As they crested the last hill before home, Penelope saw a familiar figure waiting by the corral fence. Kieran, watching for their return. He came to meet them as they approached, helping first Eliza and then Penelope from their horses. "You did it," he said simply, his eyes taking in her exhausted state and blood-stained clothing. "All 4 men will live," she confirmed, leaning against him gratefully. Though it was close, Kieran supported her as they walked toward the house. "The children are still sleeping. I've kept water hot for you to wash, and there's food when you're ready." Once inside, he helped her remove her boots and coat, then poured warm water into a basin so she could wash away the grime of the mine. As she cleaned her hands, Penelope looked around their home at the children's toys neatly stacked in the corner, the medical books sharing shelf space with Kieran's ranching manuals, the family portraits on the wall. "What is it?" Kieran asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said. "When I came west, I thought I was choosing a solitary path. I never imagined this." Kieran drew her into his arms, heedless of her damp hands against his shirt. "Regrets? Not one," she assured him, resting her head against his chest. "Though I'm beginning to think we might need to train another doctor for this territory. These all-night emergencies are harder than they used to be." He chuckled. "Getting old, Dr. O'Malley?" "Hardly," she scoffed. "Just practical. This territory is growing. One doctor can't serve everyone anymore." "Always thinking ahead," he said fondly. "But for now, you need rest. I should check on the children first." "They're fine," he assured her. "They've got a strong mother who's teaching them to be just as strong. But right now, that mother needs sleep." Penelope allowed herself to be guided to their bedroom, too exhausted to argue. As she settled beneath the covers, Kieran sat beside her, stroking her hair gently. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "What you did today, what you do every day, it matters. Not just to me and the children, but to everyone whose lives you touch." She smiled sleepily, already drifting off. "We did it together, Kieran. Everything good in my life. We built it together." As she fell asleep, Penelope's last conscious thought was of that fateful night years ago, a desperate cowboy at her door with his sick child in his arms, and the simple words that had changed all their lives. "Come in." 10 years later, the O'Malley Ranch had become the center of a thriving community. What had once been a remote homestead was now surrounded by small farms and ranches, drawn to the area by the combination of good grazing land and the presence of a skilled physician. Penelope's medical practice had evolved into a proper clinic, staffed by herself, Eliza, and 2 young doctors she had trained, including Lily, now 21 and recently returned from medical school in Philadelphia, following in her stepmother's footsteps. The twins, Samuel and Charlotte, were 13 now, as different in temperament as they were similar in appearance. Samuel had inherited his father's way with horses and seemed destined to take over the ranching side of the family's enterprises, while Charlotte showed a gift for numbers and managed the household accounts with remarkable efficiency for one so young. The family had grown once more with the addition of 8-year-old Joseph, named for Penelope's father and blessed with her healing touch and kind heart. Even at his young age, he could often be found assisting in the clinic, solemnly handing instruments to his mother or sister during minor procedures. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the one when Kieran had first brought Lily to her door. Penelope stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as her husband instructed Joseph in the proper way to saddle a pony. The sight still filled her with a contentment she had never expected to find when she'd left Philadelphia all those years ago. Lily emerged from the clinic, medical bag in hand. At 21, she was the image of her birth mother in looks, but her confident bearing and direct gaze were pure Penelope. Headed to the Reynolds place? Penelope asked as her stepdaughter joined her on the porch. Lily nodded. Mrs. Reynolds is due any day now. Thought I'd check on her while you handle things here. Penelope smiled with pride. You've become an excellent doctor, Lily. I had an excellent teacher, Lily replied with affection. Two, actually. Papa taught me about care just as much as you taught me about medicine. They watched as Joseph successfully tightened the saddle's cinch, beaming up at Kieran's approving nod. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Papa hadn't brought me to your cabin that night? Lily asked suddenly. Penelope considered the question. I try not to think about it. The idea of losing you before I even knew you. She shook her head. But I do believe some things are meant to be. Perhaps we would have found each other another way. I'm glad it happened the way it did, Lily said decisively. Even if I had to get sick to make it happen. She hugged Penelope quickly. I'll be back before supper, unless the baby decides to arrive early. As Lily rode off, Kieran and Joseph approached the porch, the boy chattering excitedly about his accomplishment. Mama, did you see? I saddled Thunder all by myself. I saw, Penelope assured him, ruffling his hair. Very impressive. Joseph, why don't you go see if Charlotte needs help with those pies she's baking? Kieran suggested. Once the boy had dashed inside, he turned to Penelope with a questioning look. Everything all right? You seem thoughtful. Just reflecting, she replied, leaning against the porch railing. Lily asked me what might have happened if you hadn't brought her to my cabin that night. Kieran moved to stand beside her, his arm slipping comfortably around her waist. At 45, he was still strong and vital, though silver now threaded through his dark hair, and lines of experience marked his face. And what did you tell her? That some things are meant to be, Penelope said, turning to face him. That perhaps we would have found each other anyway. Kieran smiled, the same smile that had first warmed her heart 15 years before. I like to think so, though I'm grateful we didn't have to test that theory. He leaned down and kissed her, a gesture that still held the same tenderness and passion as their first kiss by the Christmas fire. When they parted, Penelope kept her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. 15 years, she mused. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you appeared at my door. Other times, I can barely remember my life before you and Lily. Having regrets, Dr. O'Malley? He teased, echoing a question he'd asked her many times over the years. Not one, she replied, as she always did. Though sometimes I marvel at how differently my life turned out from what I'd planned. Better or worse? He asked, his tone light though his eyes were serious. Infinitely better, she assured him, though also more chaotic, more exhausting, and more frightening at times. She laughed softly. I thought I knew what courage was when I decided to become a doctor. But loving you and our children, that's taught me what true courage means. Kieran's expression softened. You are the bravest person I know, Penelope. Always have been. From inside the house came the sound of laughter, followed by Samuel's voice calling for his father's help with some project. Kieran sighed with mock resignation. Duty calls, he said, pressing one more kiss to her forehead. Will you join us for lunch? Charlotte's been experimenting with a new stew recipe. I'll be there shortly, she promised. I just want to enjoy the quiet for a few more minutes. As Kieran went inside, Penelope turned to look out over the land that had become her home. The desert stretched before her, beautiful in its harsh way, dotted with the signs of the community they had helped to build. In the distance, she could see a rider approaching one of the neighboring ranchers, perhaps, or a patient seeking her care. Whoever it was, they would be welcomed, just as she had welcomed a desperate father and his sick child on a night that now seemed destined rather than accidental. Penelope smiled to herself, thinking of all the doors that had opened because she had opened hers and said those simple words, "Come in," words that had led not just to healing a child's fever, but to healing hearts that had thought themselves beyond repair. She took one last moment to savor the view before turning to join her family inside the family she had never expected to have, in the home she had never planned to make, living a life more rich and full than she had ever dared to dream. As the years continued to pass, the legend of Dr. Penelope O'Malley and her cowboy husband spread throughout the territory. They had become something of a local institution, the lady doctor who had defied convention and the rancher who had supported her every step of the way. Their children had grown into respected adults, each carrying forward their parents' legacy in their own fashion. Lily married a fellow doctor and established her own practice in the growing town, specializing in the care of women and children. The twins found their own paths, Samuel taking over more of the ranch operations as Kieran grew older, while Charlotte surprised everyone by studying law through correspondence courses and becoming one of the territory's first female attorneys. Young Joseph, now 18, showed promise as both a healer and a rancher, comfortable moving between his parents' worlds. On the 20th anniversary of the night Kieran had brought Lily to Penelope's door, the family gathered for a celebration. The original cabin, preserved though no longer used as a residence, was decorated with lanterns and flowers. Friends from throughout the region came to honor the couple whose partnership had helped shape the community. As the evening wore on and guests began to depart, Kieran found Penelope standing alone on the cabin's porch, lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts, Dr. O'Malley," he said, coming to stand beside her. She smiled at the old joke. "Just remembering this porch that night. How terrified you looked with Lily in your arms." "I was terrified," he acknowledged, "though not just of losing her to fever. I think, even then, some part of me recognized that my life was about to change completely. For the better, I hope," Penelope said, leaning against him as naturally as breathing. "For the best," he corrected, his arms settling around her shoulders. At 60, his hair was now more silver than dark, but his eyes still held the same warmth that had first drawn her to him. 20 years with you has been the greatest gift of my life, Penelope." Inside the cabin, their children and grandchildren's voices mingled with laughter and music, the sounds of a family that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Penelope asked. "After Lily's fever broke, when you thought I was asleep in the chair beside her?" Kieran looked surprised. "I didn't know you were awake." "I wasn't fully," she admitted, "but I remember your voice. You said, 'Thank you for saving my world.' Did you know, even then, that she was your world?" "She was all I had left," he said simply. "After Sarah died, Lily was everything. But then—" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Then you opened that door, and suddenly my world started growing again. You didn't just save Lily that night, Penelope. You saved me too." Tears glistened in Penelope's eyes. "We saved each other, I think. I was so focused on being a doctor that I'd forgotten how to be a person. You and Lily reminded me." From inside came the sound of a child's voice calling, "Grandma! Grandpa! Come see what Joseph taught me." They shared a smile, the kind that comes from years of shared joys and sorrows, of a love tested by time and found unbreakable. "Shall we?" Kieran asked, offering his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Penelope nodded, taking his arm. Together as always. As they walked back into the cabin, into the warmth of the family they had built, Penelope thought about the many doors they had opened together over the years, doors to healing, to understanding, to growth and change. But none more important than that first door, on a desperate night when a cowboy rode home with his sick child in his arms, and she had said, simply, "Come in," and in doing so opened the door to the rest of her life.